Hey, welcome back to Hidden Badges Stories. I'm glad you're here. If this is your first time stopping by, hit that subscribe button and join the family. And wherever you're listening from right now, your kitchen, your car, your couch at midnight, drop it in the comments. I love knowing where these stories find you. Now settle in, this one's going to stay with you. The thing about Lena Kowalski was that she was exactly the kind of woman people looked through, not at, through. She wore her scrubs the same way every shift. Blue faded at the collar, the left pocket slightly lower than the right from years of carrying a penlight and a folded piece of gauze she never seemed to need but always kept. She moved through the hallways of Mercy Ridge Medical Center the way water moves around stone. Quiet, efficient, unremarkable by design. That was the word that fit her best if you weren't paying attention. Unremarkable. She had been at Mercy Ridge for 4 years. Ward 3, medical surgical. She kept her paperwork clean, her patients calm, and her head down. She didn't go to the nurses' station holiday parties. She didn't join the group texts. When someone asked where she was from, she said Ohio, which was technically true, though she hadn't lived there since she was 19 years old. Nobody asked follow-up questions. That was the thing Lena had learned. Give people one real answer and they stop digging. She was 38 years old and she was very, very good at disappearing. It was a Tuesday evening in late October when the man with the shattered collarbone arrived in Ward 3. And the evening when everything Lena had spent 4 years building began to quietly fall apart. She had just finished her notes on room 311. Mr. Gerald Foss, 62, post-op gallbladder, doing fine, complaining about the jello, when the charge nurse, Patrice, appeared at her shoulder. Kowalski. Room 318. GSW came through trauma an hour ago. They're moving him up to us while ortho figures out if they're doing surgery tonight or morning. He's stable but he's a mess, and Dr. Hargrove wants eyes on him every 30. Got it, Lena said. There's also... Patrice lowered her voice. There are 2 men outside the unit. They won't say who they are. They showed something to the charge desk downstairs and they just stood there. Security's been called, but they keep asking about the patient in 318. Lena looked up from her clipboard. What kind of something did they show? Patrice shook her head slowly. The kind that made Jamie at the front desk go very quiet and pick up the phone. Lena set down her clipboard. She walked to room 318. The man inside was in his late 50s. Big-framed, the kind of build that said he had once been something powerful, and the years had not entirely taken that from him. His left shoulder was wrapped and immobilized, his face pale beneath a 3-day beard, an IV line running into his right arm. There was a laceration above his eyebrow that had been closed with steri strips, not stitches, which meant whoever had gotten to him first had done field dressing, not hospital work. She checked his vitals, steady, blood pressure on the lower end of acceptable. She adjusted the drip, his eyes opened. They were gray, and they were for just a moment completely alert in a way that had nothing to do with the painkillers he was on. It was the alertness of someone who had trained themselves never to come out of sleep slowly. Hey, Lena said. You're on Ward 3 at Mercy Ridge. You're stable. My name is Lena. I'm your nurse tonight. Can you tell me your name? He looked at her for 3 full seconds before he answered. Tanner, he said. His voice was gravel and patience. Frank Tanner? Okay, Frank. Do you know where you are? Hospital. A pause. Mercy Ridge, Baltimore. Good. Do you have any allergies? Penicillin. She noted it even though it was already in his chart. She wanted to hear him say it. She wanted to know how present he was. There are 2 men outside this floor, she said, keeping her voice exactly as neutral as she kept it for every patient. They're asking about you. Do you want me to tell you anything about them, or do you already know? Frank Tanner closed his eyes. Something moved across his face that might have been relief, or might have been the opposite. Don't let them in, he said. I'm not in charge of that. Then find someone who is. He opened his eyes again. Please. Lena was quiet for a moment. She looked at the laceration above his eyebrow. She looked at the field-dressed quality of the initial wound care. She looked at his hands, which were resting at his sides with a stillness that did not match the body of a man in that much pain. She had seen hands like that before. She had had hands like that herself, once, a long time ago in a different life, in a different country, in a uniform she no longer owned. Okay, she said. I'll see what I can do. She left room 318 and went to find Patrice. What she found instead, at the nurse's station, was a man she had never seen before in her 4 years at Mercy Ridge Medical Center. He was standing just inside the unit door, which meant security had not yet arrived, or had decided that whatever he'd shown them was sufficient clearance. He was perhaps 45, broad in the shoulders, wearing civilian clothes that were just slightly too well fitted to be random. He had the look of someone who had learned to stand in public spaces without drawing attention, and had not entirely succeeded. He was looking directly at her. Nurse Kowalski, he said. It wasn't a question. Lena stopped walking. She was aware in the peripheral way she'd trained herself to be aware of things, of where the exits were, of what was between her and the door, of who else was in the hallway. Can I help you, she said. My name is Garrett Cole. He didn't extend his hand. I'm here about Frank Tanner. I can't discuss patients with. I know. He said it without impatience, as though he expected that answer. I'm not asking you to, I'm asking you to listen for 30 seconds. Lena looked at him. You have 20. Something shifted in his face, just slightly. Your father sent me. The hallway was the same hallway it had been 5 seconds ago. The fluorescent lights made the same low hum. Somewhere down toward room 311, Gerald Foss was probably complaining about his jello again. Lena said, I don't have a father. You have Colonel Warren Kowalski, retired, currently residing in Flagstaff, Arizona, and he asked me to find you, because the man in room 318 is the reason your father is still alive, and right now there are 2 men outside this hospital who are here to make sure that debt never gets acknowledged. The 20 seconds had passed. Lena hadn't moved. Who are you? She said. Not the name. The name she'd already been given. What are you? Garrett Cole held her gaze. Force Recon, retired. Your father's unit, Fallujah, 2004. I go by Cold Front. Lena said nothing for a long moment. The thing about a call sign is that it doesn't mean anything to most people. It's just a word, just a nickname, military nonsense. But if you had spent 14 months embedded with a reconnaissance unit operating out of a forward operating base in the Al Anbar province, if you had patched up gunshot wounds with supplies you had to improvise and made calls under fire that you still didn't entirely know how you'd made, if you had heard your own call sign spoken in the dark over a radio when you were certain no one was coming, then a call sign meant everything. Nightingale, Lena said quietly. It was the first time she had spoken that word in 4 years. Garrett Cole nodded once. Your father's been trying to reach you for 6 weeks, he said. You weren't easy to find. I wasn't trying to be, I know. But Frank Tanner pulled your father out of a burning vehicle outside Ramadi in 2004 and took 3 rounds doing it. He's been off the grid since he retired, and someone found him, and now he's in that room with a shattered collarbone and 2 men outside who would like very much for him not to testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee next month. Lena looked back toward room 318. The door was closed. Frank Tanner was stable. His blood pressure was on the lower end of acceptable. Testify about what? She said. About a program that was supposed to be shut down in 2009 and wasn't. Lena was quiet for a moment. And my father? Wants you to keep Frank alive until we can get him somewhere safe. Garrett paused. And he wants you to know he's sorry. That's what he said to tell you. He said you'd understand what for. She did understand. That was the problem with understanding things. It didn't make them smaller. The trouble was that 2 days before this conversation, Lena had been a perfectly unremarkable nurse on Ward 3 at Mercy Ridge Medical Center, and she had been fine with that. She had been, if not happy, then at least functional in the way that people who have survived things they weren't supposed to survive learn to be functional. She had her apartment with the succulent on the windowsill that she remembered to water. She had her Tuesday evening runs along the waterfront. She had Mr. Gerald Foss complaining about his jello. She had chosen this, the quiet, the invisible blue scrubs, the looking through. She thought about her father, who she had not spoken to in 4 years, not since the night she'd driven away from a Veterans Affairs parking lot in Flagstaff, with nothing but what fit in the back of a Subaru and a decision she had not entirely made so much as fallen into. She thought about Frank Tanner's gray eyes, open and alert before they should have been. She thought about hands that stay still when they shouldn't. The 2 men outside, she said. What are they? Contractors, Garrett said. Private. Well-funded. Not authorized but operating as if they are. Armed? Likely. Concealed. Then they're not getting onto this floor, Lena said. Because this is a hospital and I have patients. She said it the same way she said everything, flat and practical. But something had changed in the way she was standing. Some small alignment that Garrett Cole apparently noticed because he went slightly still. Nightingale, he said. I need to know if you're with me. I'm a nurse, she said. I'm with my patient. Everything else is secondary to that. She walked back toward room 318. What happened in the next 40 minutes happened quickly, by the standards of things that happen in hospitals, which is to say, it happened slowly by any other standard. The first man came through the stairwell door at the end of the hall at 9:47 p.m. He was wearing a jacket that was too heavy for a Baltimore October indoors, and he was moving with the specific kind of purposeful quiet that Lena recognized the way you recognize a word in a foreign language you studied long ago. Not in your head, but somewhere older. She was standing at the nurse's station with a medication tray when he entered the floor. She did not look up immediately. She noted him, in her peripheral vision, height, weight, the way his right hand stayed close to his side. She noted where Patrice was, behind the station, head down over paperwork. Where the overnight aide, a young man named Brandon, was, down at the far end checking linens. She set down the medication tray. Can I help you? She called down the hall. The man stopped. He looked at her. I'm looking for a patient. Visiting hours ended at 8, Lena said. You'll need to come back in the morning. It's urgent. It usually is. She walked toward him. She kept her posture what it always was. Shouldered slightly forward, the unconscious rounding that nurses get from years of leaning over beds. Nothing about her said anything except tired and professional. If it's a family emergency, you can check with the charge desk downstairs and they can. Room 318, the man said. Lena stopped. She was 12 feet from him now. She could see his jacket more clearly. She could see the particular stiffness at his right hip. That patient is not receiving visitors, she said. I think he'll want to see me. Patients don't always get what they want. That's generally why they're here. She held his gaze. I'm going to need you to leave the floor, sir. If you don't, I'm going to call security, and they're going to escort you out, and we're going to have a much longer evening than either of us wants. The man looked at her for a moment. He was calculating something. She could see it in the way his weight shifted, barely perceptibly, onto his back foot. She had been in rooms with men making that calculation before. You don't want to do this, he said quietly. It was not a threat exactly. It was a statement of fact delivered the way. Statements of fact are delivered by people who are accustomed to being believed. I'm a nurse, Lena said. I've been doing this for 4 years, and before that I was doing something considerably less pleasant. So yes, I do want to do this. She had not raised her voice. She was not going to raise her voice. Ward 3 was a recovery floor, and the patients were trying to sleep. Please leave now. There are moments when the thing that keeps a situation from becoming something worse is simply a person willing to hold a line without blinking. Lena had learned that in a different context, in body armor, in places without fluorescent lights. But the principle was the same. The man looked at her for 3 more seconds, then he left. She waited until the stairwell door closed behind him. Then she walked directly to room 318. Frank Tanner was awake. He had pulled himself slightly upright in the bed, which had to have been agony with the collarbone, and he was watching the door with those gray, too alert eyes. They came, he said. One of them, Lena said. His friend is presumably still outside the building. I need to know how long we have before they try something that can't be resolved with a conversation. Frank looked at her steadily. You know what you're doing. I'm a nurse. Right, he said. Just like your father's just a retired colonel who grows tomatoes in Flagstaff. Lena checked his IV line. His tomatoes are genuinely terrible, she said. He's been growing them for 15 years and he has no instinct for it. Frank made a sound that was almost a laugh, then stopped because laughing with a shattered collarbone is its own particular punishment. Warren told me about you, he said. Not everything. He's not that kind of man. But enough. What did he tell you? That you were the best field medic he'd ever seen. That you had more nerve under fire than people 3 times your experience. A pause. That he handled your separation wrong, and he'd spent 4 years trying to figure out how to say so. Lena was quiet for a moment, her hands still moving, checking the monitors with the automatic competence of someone who has done something so many thousands of times it has become part of how she breathes. He could have called, she said finally. You could have written number. He wrote 11, Frank said. He didn't send any of them. He said they all sounded like excuses. Another pause, gentler this time. He's 71 years old, Lena. His hands shake in the morning now. He wanted me to tell you that too. Lena looked at the monitor. His blood pressure had come up slightly. That was good. I need to focus on keeping you alive right now, she said. Can you do that conversation later? I've been keeping myself alive for 57 years, Frank said. I'm reasonably good at it. You came in with a gunshot wound and field dressing on a hospital floor. That was a rough Tuesday. She almost smiled. She was surprised by the almost. Garrett Cole appeared in the doorway. He'd removed his jacket, which helped him look less like what he was and more like someone who might plausibly be visiting a patient. Second man is still outside the main entrance, he said. I've got someone on him, but we have maybe 2 hours before they shift tactics. What happens in 2 hours? Lena asked. They stop being subtle. She thought for a moment. The floor had 11 patients tonight. Room 311 through 322 with 315 empty. Standard overnight staff, herself, Patrice, Brandon the aide, and Dr. Hargrove on call but not currently present. Security at Mercy Ridge ran 2 guards on overnight, one at the main entrance, one making rounds. Neither of them was trained for what Garrett Cole was describing. I need Hargrove here, she said. Not on call, physically present, and I need you to get Frank transferred tonight, not tomorrow morning. Tonight, transfer where? Somewhere they don't know. Garrett. She said the name directly for the first time, and he straightened almost imperceptibly. You said force recon. You still have contacts who can move a patient discreetly? Yes. Then use them. I can stabilize him for transport if you can get me 2 hours in a vehicle with someone who knows what they're doing on the medical end. Garrett looked at Frank. Frank looked at Lena. Nightingale, Frank said. It was the first time he'd used the call sign. He said it the way her father's unit used to say it, back when she was 24 years old and stitching people together in the dark. Not as a nickname, but as a recognition. As a way of saying, I see what you are. She hated how much that still meant to her. I'll need to call Hargrove, she said. And I need someone at the stairwell door. I can cover the stairwell, Garrett said. You're not a security guard. No, he agreed. I'm something else. The next hour and 40 minutes were the longest Lena had spent since the night she'd driven away from that parking lot in Flagstaff. She called Hargrove, who was annoyed and then not annoyed when she explained, quietly and precisely, what the situation was. She briefed Patrice, who was a 12-year veteran of Ward 3, and had seen enough in those 12 years to accept an unusual situation without excessive questions. Though her eyes went wide and she said, "Lord have mercy," under her breath, and then went straight to work. She stabilized Frank Tanner for transport, with the focused economy of someone who has done emergency medicine, under conditions considerably more demanding than a well-lit hospital room. She checked the wound, adjusted the immobilization, recalculated his pain management for movement, noted his pressure and his oxygen and the way he breathed. That slight hitch on the left side from the impact, and she talked him through all of it in the low, steady voice she used for patients who were frightened. Though Frank Tanner was not precisely frightened, he was watchful. There was a difference. At 11:22 p.m., a vehicle pulled into the ambulance bay. Garrett confirmed it. 2 men inside, both known to him, both vetted. One was a former Pererescueman, which was enough for Lena. She walked alongside the gurney when they moved Frank. Down the service elevator, not the main one. Through the corridor that ran behind the laundry and the loading dock. She held his chart in her left hand, and she walked with her shoulders slightly forward, the unconscious nurses rounding, and she did not look like anything except a nurse doing her job at nearly midnight, which was what she was. At the ambulance bay door, Frank Tanner reached out with his good hand and caught her wrist. Not hard, just enough to stop her. "Your father asked me something else," he said, "before I lost contact with him, 6 weeks ago." Lena waited. "He asked me to tell you that he still has the letters. All 11 of them." Frank's gray eyes held hers steadily. "He said he'll send them whenever you want them, or he'll throw them away if that's what you need. But they're there." The ambulance bay was cold, the way hospital loading docks are always cold, and the light was harsh and functional, and somewhere inside Ward 3 Gerald Foss was probably awake and dissatisfied with his jello situation. And Patrice was doing the rounds Lena had handed off. And everything was ordinary, and everything was not ordinary at all. "Tell him," Lena said, and then stopped. She tried again. "Tell him to send them," she said. "I'll read them." Frank Tanner nodded once. Then he released her wrist, and the Pererescueman took the gurney, and Garrett Cole put his hand briefly on her shoulder. Not long, just a moment, the kind of contact that passes between people who understand certain things about each other without having to name them. And then they were gone, and the ambulance bay door closed, and Lena was standing alone in the cold concrete corridor. She stood there for approximately 30 seconds. Then she straightened her shoulders, tucked the chart under her arm, and walked back inside to finish her shift. Patrice looked up when she came back onto the floor. "He's out? He's out. And the men downstairs? That's someone else's problem now." She picked up her clipboard from the station. "How's room 3111? Awake and very unhappy about the jello. I'll go talk to him." She walked down the hall. The fluorescent lights made their low hum. Her scrubs were blue, faded at the collar, left pocket slightly lower than the right. She was, to look at her, exactly what she appeared to be. A tired, competent woman working a night shift in a hospital. Nobody who looked at her would think anything else. That was the thing she had learned in 14 months in the Al Anbar province and 4 years on Ward 3. That stillness could be its own kind of strength. That choosing not to be seen was not the same as having nothing worth seeing. Her father knew 11 drafts of an apology by heart. He grew terrible tomatoes in the Arizona heat. His hands shook in the morning now. She would read the letters. She pushed open the door to room 311. "Mr. Foss," she said, "tell me about the jello. That's the story for tonight. If it found you somewhere good, let me know in the comments. I love hearing where you all are. And if someone else needs to hear a story like this one, share it with them. Hit like if it stayed with you. Subscribe if you're not already part of this family. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves."